Somebody,
what?
somebody come get
Who
me.
is this guy? Does he even know that his name is on this show?
They're like, this is how we know that Landon makes everything up on the spot on this show. He doesn't remember anything.
Hello, Money Lap. Landon, it's growing, but we have a
What
big problem.
is growing? Oh,
the show. You know how? Well, do you know that there's too many damn podcasts out there? You want to know how I know?
why?
So I'm listening to one of the most popular podcasts in the world, and within it, at the beginning, they did this call to action for the listeners to share with other friends to help them grow because podcasts are not growing. So we're no longer a podcast, we're just a show. My hope is that, therefore, it's different than us being a podcast. People will be compelled to share our show with other people.
Oh, so we're just doing a little changing the verbiage here. We're not a podcast. We have a show.
The vernacular is changing now. So if you like this
That's
show,
like what politicians do.
that is a bit politician-y, isn't it?
Yeah, when the words don't work for them anymore, they just change the words. They leave the meaning, but they change the words.
It is an election year, so you know what? That does fit par for the course with us. Okay.
So we're a show now.
We're a show now. So no longer that other P word. We don't say it. Nope. No longer. On today's show, we're going to talk playoffs. Of course, I made the playoffs for the Xfinity Series. That's what my hat is if you're watching on YouTube. The Cup Series is in trouble. We've got an F1 championship battle and a discussion about words. That's a weird one. Xfinity Series driver rumors and potentially a special guest to discuss IndyCar's new charters and, of course, NASCAR's charters. And we've become so damn popular, we have a really long PR lap. So we're going to try and rip through it. We start with my race. Not much to talk about other than the viral moment I had drifting through turn 1 and 2 there. In a race that we probably were a top 10 car, but then we had a pit road infraction, drove back through the field, then got nailed by Brendan Poole into turn 1 so hard it bent the rear bumper, did a massive slide, just touched the wall, and I was like, as I came through the apron there, I was thinking, oh, no. And then it was like, it hit the banging, and I was like, wait, it might come back. It's coming back. And then it just touched the wall and came back. So I like to say about 90% luck, 10% skill.
But hey, not much to talk about.
Yeah, not much to talk about. We did get
my race at Bristol. Not much to talk about. Got hit by Brendan Poole. Speeding on pit road. Went to the back. Came to the front. Went to the back. Came to the front. Drifted through 1 and 2. But hey, we're in the playoffs. Let's go.
Hey, we made it. We made it with the. We clinched early by getting a stage point in stage 2 where we stayed out in old tires. I was so loose in front of the field. I can't believe I didn't wreck the entire field. Like I was dead sideways off of turn 4 to turn 2 in front of everyone on new tires. Cole Custer eventually just booted me up the track.
Loose at Bristol is one of the most brutal, terrifying, painful experiences.
It really is. It is like difficult because you just can't hide, and you have to be in the throttle, and you've got to keep the momentum up in the center. So it's just you're just teetering on disaster. We were able to score 1 stage point. Even got hit by Dale Jr. on the last corner of the last lap for that second 2 points. Thanks Dale. But then that clinched us into the playoffs. We also got in on the owners for the first time ever for Big Machine Racing. So pretty cool. Finished 16th. We're ready for the playoffs. Got to do the media day yesterday. That was fun. I think I'm the only driver who has fun as I sat in the green room as other drivers came in and sarcastically said, I love talking to the media. Because it's not cool to be like excited about that stuff as a race car driver, I've discovered.
No, it's not. You're supposed to be like Martin Truex or something, and
just
not cool
care.
to enjoy it.
Not care. My slide did millions of views on Instagram.
Sorry for calling out Martin Truex specifically. That was kind of mean. That was rude.
You just knocked a guy while he's down right now. Sped on pit road. We'll get into that later. Let's do some reviews. On Apple, we did have new reviews. We're up over 180-something on our quest to 200. We're going to try and rip through this PR lap stuff, as I said. So, great show, gentlemen. Formula D did comment on my drift, by the way. So I maybe have an offer to go do some professional drifting, which for all the people that worked on Proving Grounds are laughing at because I was a terrible drifter during that show. This is from Art Hendricks. Great show, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure to hear from racers who are in the know about more forms of motorsports, both in and outside the USA. Your opinions and thoughts are usually in line with a true race fan, which is refreshing. If everyone agrees, that's not a very interesting room. Parker, congratulations on a career you should be proud of. You have competed at most all levels of competition, all with consistency in completing the laps, if not up front when the checkered flag falls. Well done. Thank you for the podcast. Cheers, Art. Thanks, Art. You take the next one.
You are Apple Review. That's the title of this one. From Lefty Lane Auto Sales. Okay.
Whoa!
My name is Zach. Yeah. My name is Zach. I'm from Northern California. I've been a NASCAR fan since the early 1990s. I listen to most, if not all, racing podcasts, especially on NASCAR platforms, but also dive into a lot of other motorsports series as well. Funny that he would mention that because we're not actually a podcast. We are a show. So
Yeah, thanks.
With that said, this is the most well-rounded show. See, he knows that. He knows that we're not a podcast. He called us a show.
Let's
between the
go.
knowledge you guys have and the chemistry between you two, and the humor within the show. We're funny?
Are we funny?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll
what?
take it. I look
man,
forward
we've
to
been
this
serious
podcast
this whole time.
weekly. Oh, he looks forward. He meant show. I look forward to this show weekly. Keep up the great work, and thank you both for all you do. P.S. It will not be the same watching the Xfinity Series next year without being able to cheer on Parker. I would agree with that. Look forward to anyone off situation to do. Anyone, I don't know what he meant by that. Off season? Maybe it was typo. Autocorrect.
Yeah,
Hope you
you
both
really
have a great
trailed
off
off there.
season here in a few weeks.
Cheer on during pit reporting. Yeah, we appreciate it. You really trailed off as the reading became tough. This person, Brandon Heller, said, the quest to 200, 5 stars. My name is Brendan Heller from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Doxed himself. That was not us. I'm trying to become internet famous like Hawk to a girl, but so far it isn't working. I truly love your show. Thank you for knowing it's a show, not a podcast. I also want to be the 200th review, so I guess I'm going to have to keep coming back and leaving these. Since you read these in the show, I figured by doing this, I'll just make myself a weekly guest. In all seriousness, I do listen every week and really do enjoy the insight. I do wish Parker was going to continue racing full-time, and I look forward to the day Landon gets back on track to keep up the great work. Brandon, good luck on your quest to be internet famous.
Hey, I just
Talk on that thing.
realized something. Weren't we supposed to have somebody come on our show as a guest?
No, we did it.
Did we?
You forgot?
Did we have Dylan? Dylan did come on the show, right?
Yes.
Yes, for our 1-year anniversary episode where we
That's
did
right.
the Q&A, we had.
Okay, so
man.
you know what? He
Wait a minute, I
tweeted
can't
something.
wait till he clips that.
My brain
We're
is
not
fried.
getting rid of that. No, not even a little bit.
Gosh.
That is incredible.
Somebody,
what?
Somebody, come get
Who
me.
is this guy? Does he even know that his name is on this show?
They're like, this is how we know that Landon makes everything up on the spot on this show. He doesn't remember anything. He does not have a genuine memory to actually recall the things
Should we-
that he's talking about.
Should we be calling a doctor? Do we have to send
We
like
should.
a
We
like
really
a medical
should.
like a like a wellness check your way?
Oh my gosh!
We have
too
another
many
one
race
from
cars.
our buddy there who basically has an address that looks like his Bitcoin address. He said it's not his Bitcoin address. We're not going to get into that. Thank you, bud. This person, MC Gallion, Robert, said on Spotify, I love your podcast. My son and I are both big NASCAR fans, so we spend our weeks working in our butcher shop and listening to our NASCAR podcast until the next weekend's race. Thank you all for all you do. Love that. That's great.
Nice.
Yeah. Good luck with the butcher shop. I do like steaks. So, if you're sending any somewhere. On YouTube, ripping through some of these, Davey Koss, The Money Lap, is lapping other motorsports podcast. Ooh, that's a good one.
Nice.
And also saw this, by the way. We had a special commenter on our latest long-form clips. If you have not heard, on our YouTube, we post the full episodes, but we also take some of the best discussions and create sort of smaller clips, 10, 15 minutes, 8 to 10, 15 minutes, somewhere in there. One viewer was John Hunter Nemechek on our spotters one, where we asked, are spotters needed? And he wrote, spotters are for sure needed, by the way.
Well, hold on a second. I need to.
What?
This is where I need to pick on our content team here. Did we really title that video with NASCAR could solve a major problem by removing spotters?
You bet we did.
Is that like
And-
it takes a degree in clickbait psychology to come up with that headline? Like that is a master's degree in clickbaitology. That's what I was trying to say.
We have a really simple system. It's 10 out of 10s, which means get whatever gets people to click, but also has the truth in there. So push it as far as you can. 11 out of 10
we have good we have genuine content, but my God, that headline that's a doozy.
Well, it got John Hunter Nemechek, Cup Series driver, to comment on it.
It did.
So you know what? It's working. Yeah.
Okay.
One other call out for YouTube, a little bit of an announcement here. We have been doing the numbers, speaking of understanding clickbait and that sort of thing, and you may be noticing our YouTube is growing because we're getting really smart at it, and I'm not going to lie. It's not me. It's our great team. But we did see that 84% of people who watch our videos are not subscribers. If you're one of those watching this right now, what is wrong with you? We could be at a silver button right now. We could be at 100,000 subscribers by this moment if you would just subscribe. So do that right now, please. And like and comment below. Last thing was an email here, and it said, "Howdy. Love the commentary you all give on all forms of motorsports. You both have great banter, and it is an essential midweek listen while at work. Keep up the great," he said podcast, he meant show, "and win that championship, Parker. P.S. Thanks, producer Josh, for the Money Lap sponsorship to race in the Rookie Rush on Drafty Car." By the way, big announcement, Drafty Car. You can now get ad-free for $10, which is great. So good for Brian Blackford. We ripped through the PR lap.
You're welcome, Jake. You're my favorite driver, Jake. Keep winning out there.
You and the 10,000 others that have had that sponsorship.
You know what else you can get for $10?
What is that?
You can pretty much get any 64 scale diecast on spoilerdiecast.com for under $10 because they have a sale right now, and there is a whole bunch of 20% off diecast. I'm looking at Kyle Larson's 2021 Phoenix race win, Kurt Busch's McDonald's 2022 McDonald's number 45. There's a ton of diecast on spoilerdiecast.com for under $10. So
love that.
Take $20, give 10 of it to Blackford for Drafty Car. Get rid of those ads and just go straight through with get more races in, more reps in. Take the other $10, go to spoilerdiecast.com. Get you some high quality diecast and apparel. If you spend more than $20, you get free shipping. So you might as well add that. Spend $30. 10 at Drafty Car.
Do that.
20 at spoilerdiecast.com. That's not an actual full on ad read. I can finish the rest. They have over 1,100 unique products currently in stock. Spoiler Diecast, they have one of the largest inventories in the industry. They're NASCAR focused, kind of like us, but they do offer a wide range of diecast and apparel options. IndyCar, F1, dirt, sprint cars. So just like the Money Lap, they are race fans just like us, constantly growing their offerings, their inventory. This is like the digital internet version of the childhood shopping mall NASCAR diecast store that we all grew up to know and love. SpoilerDiecast.com. Check them out.
Love it. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing my number 48 Spike Light Coolers Chevrolet Camaro in diecast form. I have the prototype right here. It's the first one that was ever made, was given to me. Thank you very much. Obviously, the last one that will be me full time. So that is on SpoilerDiecast.com. You can go on there and use code MONEYLAP and get one signed by me. So go check it out. This will be out soon. I even have the prototype. How cool is that? I can't get it off this base, though, which is a problem. So because it's the prototype model, they've glued the base where you would, like, unscrew it. So I can't put it in my studio here, which is an issue. But I'm going to figure that out. I'm going to get it off this base. Let's talk the Cup Series. Should we?
So let's, by all means.
Right. So we're not going to break new ground here. I don't believe, because everyone watched a race the other night. That it was a race, and there was racing. It was primarily led by.
It was a
race that happened. There was Kyle Larson, who was driving around Bristol for about 462 laps by himself, and then there was everyone else racing. So that was pretty much how it went down. One of the most dominant nights we've ever seen at Bristol. I think the most dominant since like 1976 or something. I actually saw a fan leaving, and I go, "Hey man!" Like I'm on the golf cart leaving, and there's everyone's flooding out, and so it's really big traffic, whatever. And he goes, "Hey man," like give me his fist bump and that sort of stuff. I said, "Did you have fun?" He goes, "That was one of the worst races I've ever seen." And he goes, I've been coming to races since the 70s, and that is in the top 5 worst. Now, I think that is aggressive. It was not that good of a race up front, but there was a lot of playoff implications and that sort of thing happening. It did seem tough to pass. There's no doubt this was not the best product that's ever been on the short tracks. I think there was a lot of enthusiasm. There was a huge crowd, one of the biggest I've seen there in many years. And I think the TV ratings were higher, all from that spring race and the enthusiasm around this idea that the tires would wear out and that sort of thing. And then on Saturday morning, I was speaking to one team, and they said, our math shows us that the right side tire can go 300 laps. And that's when I knew we were screwed. So, not a great one. What would you like to unpack in here? Is there somewhere you'd like to go with this? I think a lot of people by this point, have heard all of the idea, what the basis behind tires are and how they get to, how they're made and all that stuff. Everyone's talked about that. Everyone knows this is an issue. Even NASCAR said it wasn't what they wanted to see. How do we push it forward? What do we do? Where does it go from here, Landon?
I don't know. I don't want to. I guess I don't want to assume that our listeners have heard everything and know everything, but it also feels exhausting because we've hashed this stuff. I guess anybody that's listened to this show consistently over the last year has heard us hash and rehash these tire conversations. So the first place I wanted to go was just some of the comments that other people have made. Did you catch Chris Gabehart's comments post race on pit road?
Yeah, about the cars being equal.
That one stood out to me about how equal the cars are. And I have always been, I would say always, generally speaking, I am a big proponent of these standardized cars. What inspires me about them is if you just look at the name stock car racing, right? And what in my mind, and I think other people could believe this or interpret this differently, but in my mind, one of the origins of stock car racing is that you're based on this like production car. Now that's a potentially flawed thinking because early on it was like a production car, but then you modified it into a race car, right? So you could say that like the origin story of stock car racing was actually, ingenuity and modifications to a stock car. But I like this idea of a stock car, right? Like it's based on some production vehicle or mass manufactured vehicle, and then everybody has to race that same car to see who can go the fastest, right, in it.
Yep. But
what Chris Gabehart was basically saying is, hey, the cars are so similar. You have a field of 40 cars that are within 0.2 of each other. Passing's going to be hard. You have the best drivers in the world. They don't make a lot of mistakes. All the cars are going the same speed. They're all designed the same. We're all running basically the same setups. Everything is so consistent and predictable. Where are you going to get passing, right? And I think it's a great thing to point out as to why aero sensitivities feel worse than they've ever felt, right? And why all this stuff sort of passing is harder than it's ever been, and why that's a really good point because everything is so equal that, it takes the variance in speed and mistakes to create passing and action. Really, really good point there. It's hard to argue against that. So I still don't want to give up the idea of the standardized cars, though, and the equal equipment. From there, my solution to the problem is like, okay, well, let's have standardized cars and equal equipment, but we need to have cars that just are dynamic. They change. The speeds change when the cars get hotter. The brakes wear out. The tires wear out. The bodies, they get damage on them, so they lose downforce. And, it's just like things aren't the same over the course of a race, and that's what creates the dynamic effect. I like the idea that we all start from the same place. We might end in a different place, but we all start from the same place, right? That's my mindset. So then that brings in the conversation that we've all hashed to death, which is tires. The tire one for me is interesting because if we take Goodyear at face value, and I can park that thought for just a second, but if we take Goodyear at face value, Goodyear's like, it's the same tire. We have no idea. We're baffled. It's the same tire. Like, okay, Goodyear, we believe you. It's the same tire. It is astounding that like those changes in weather and those, not that they're not dramatic changes, right? But like 20 degrees of track temp or whatever the weather difference from the spring to now was, and then having race cars on track a couple days before as opposed to a green racetrack in the spring, that difference could create that much of a drastic end product. Like, that's wild if I take Goodyear at face value, right?
Yep.
The part that I parked initially at taking Goodyear at face value is, and I don't know enough about tire manufacturing, but it's like, this will get clipped and you guys can make fun of me, but it's like, I can't help but to think that, like, you're dealing with these materials, they get heated, there's processes, they get cooled, there's what am I trying to say? Reprocessing and all this stuff that goes into making a tire. I liken it to like making a sourdough, right?
Yep.
You can make a sourdough bread, use the same recipe 2 times in a row, but what are the outside factors that affected the end result of your tire, right? Or your bread. And so for Goodyear, and that's probably a pretty dangerous thing to say to Goodyear, and I'll get a cease and desist over it, to say that their quality control is not consistent enough. But like, when we're talking about setting up race cars that are to the micrometer, and to, pounds of downforce make a difference in these drivers and these cars, everything is simulated all the way to the nth degree. And you have a grouping of tires that were manufactured a year ago and then raced in April, or manufactured in January and then raced in April, and then they used the same recipe to make those same tires again, and they were made in the summertime this time, and then put on a racetrack in September. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they made the same tire, but it just acted different. Like, obviously it did. The end result, we can see that.
Idea.
Yeah.
I have a pitch.
I know I just blurted out a bunch of stuff, but like, those are my kind of thoughts that at least I'm trying to come up with, like, what's a unique perspective here, a new perspective. Those are my only unique perspectives at the moment.
Well, I think it sucks to be talking about tires still, and it's wild. And this is different than a stock car has ever been in terms of the size of the tire and the amount of rubber that's on the road and that sort of thing. And I think that has made this difficult to create the racing that we've known forever with a car that's just not the same as the cars we knew forever. So I get that. You mentioned stock cars, road relevance, that sort of thing. I keep going back to this idea of, why is a race car on slicks?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Now, Formula E has done this where they use basically road tires. Why wouldn't we just show up and be on road tires? Wouldn't that be the best example of Goodyear's products, is take road tires and run around out there? Hey, wow, look at these things. Look what happens. Road tires are not meant to go pound into a half mile, 28 degrees of banking for 500 laps. That's just not what they're meant to do. Now, I won't say this would make any big difference or anything, but the concept is like, we're tailoring this all this way, and there is just, Denny had on his podcast. He has a podcast, by the way, not a show, about how, the way that road tires are made is highly scientific and down to the latest detail. And then a lot of the way that race car tires are made for Goodyear it's far more handmade and that sort of thing, which can lend down the path that you were going, which is like, hey, maybe it's sometimes just like making dough. The process changes. There's external factors, whatever. You end up with a different result. Then let's just use road tires. Now, on that one, you got an owner who's over there like, well, we can't make any changes to the car. It'll cost me. Hold on. Let me get somewhere. He's like, well, we can't make any changes to the car. It'll cost us too much money, because he's in a negotiation with NASCAR and that sort of stuff. I don't care. Literally don't care. Like, if it costs money, well, I would think that's the best spend of money possible, so that the 140,000 people that show up to Bristol walk away not saying, that's the worst thing I've ever seen. Right? They spend hundreds of dollars each. And the people that tune in on TV, and for everyone that, makes their living off of this thing, the last thing I ever want to hear, especially in the newest deal, $1.1 billion into the sport from the media side alone. Teams getting more than ever before. I do not want to hear, oh, that cost too much money. Nope, don't care, have no sympathy. None whatsoever. So whatever the point being, there's probably a fair amount of solutions that involve a bit of cost, then go do it. And I don't think that's something you'd hear anywhere else. And that's my thought. You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
I don't know. I mean, that was very I don't know if I disagree with you. It's like it's very shock jock like you, talking head. It's very
really?
talking head of you to say that, because it's like,
Why?
in all
Because what do I
reality,
care?
there's still only so much money to spend. NASCAR, Goodyear, all the
But
people
you-
in charge.
hold on,
they
hold
can't
on,
just
hold
be.
on.
They just can't be mad kings that make decisions and change this and change that. Like,
Wait a second,
I'm not,
Mr.
I'm not defending
tweeted-
you from the what.
Well, you just tweeted the other day. I don't about unlimited green white checkers. I don't have to fund the repair of the cars. So I want to see a green flag finish.
Yes, but
So you basically
that's
said
not,
the same thing.
I didn't basically say the same thing because what you
How is
just
that not
said
the
is
same?
like, if NASCAR and Goodyear wake up one day and say, let's change this, and it's like, okay,
Do it. Do it.
I don't know, maybe,
I don't own a
maybe,
team,
I don't know.
So I just don't have to deal with it. All I have to do is either watch as a fan or obviously be on the media side commentating on it. But to me,
You're right. Oh, okay. So that's the part of what I said that maybe
Yeah.
that was the spirit behind my tweet, which is similar to what you're saying, and you're right. Was just like, hey, I can say this because I don't own a team.
I don't own a team. Now, if in 10 years I own a team,
so yeah, give me all the
Which-
unlimited green white checkers you can.
I don't know what sort of lobotomy I'd need to go do that. The idea,
If you're gonna make me watch Kyle Larson lead 470 laps, then you better let me have unlimited green white checkers.
exactly.
Oh
Now-
man,
And one thing we always get into is we do like to see excellence in its best form in motorsports because this is a sport. I do,
Absolutely.
I did think that was a pretty amazing display by the 5 team and Kyle Larson. They never relinquished the lead on pit road. They were miles ahead of everyone on pit road. They were miles ahead of everyone on track. Larson never put a wheel wrong. Let's give due where it's due. He put in and that team put in an incredible performance. No doubt about that. But not maybe the best show in that sense.
so other kind of nuggets that came out of Bristol and the racing and stuff that was interesting. I want to say that Christopher Bell articulated something that I've been saying for a long time. You've heard me say it on this podcast many, many times. I felt like he articulated this better than I ever have, which was he thinks that Cup Series driving standards changed as soon as everyone realized the next gen could take a beating and would like to see the ethics policed by someone. Now, I don't know if I agree with the whole that we need to see ethics policed by someone, but I felt that he articulated that the driving standards changed as soon as everyone realized the next gen could take a beating. I think that was that is well said, but I think it started before the next gen. I think it started in 2007 with the car tomorrow, because that car is what ushered an era of bumpers that line up, stronger bodywork, stronger bumper structure. And that is where driving standards began to change. And that is where cars started to take beatings that you'd never seen before.
And you've definitely said that a lot on this podcast. So maybe he's a listener that agrees with you. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a listener, by the way. I did have another Cup driver this past Sunday tell me he was a big-time listener and enjoys our podcast. Enjoys our deep dives, by the way. One other thing that stuck out, obviously, is that it was a playoff cutoff race, so 4 drivers were removed from the playoffs. That would be Harrison Burton, Brad Keselowski, Ty Gibbs, and Martin Truex Jr., who was in position to be fine and advance through on points, running in second place, sped on pit road from the corner to the straightaway, just didn't bleed the speed back enough. Maybe his radius wasn't big enough. I don't know exactly. I haven't seen the SMT. But big mistake. He went back to 28th, got to 24th, and could not move forward at the end of that race. Took a top 2 car, couldn't move. And, the one thing I'll say is I saw on lap 70, I look on my monitor, and all the cars from first to 33rd are running the same lap time. And I was just like, to Chris Gabehart's point, I came on the talkback, and I was like, oh, boy. And, I was hoping maybe there was a fall off at 100 laps or something where the right rear suddenly go away or whatever, but that wasn't the case. So our brackets, we're not going to dive into those because we have so much on today's show, but we have posted those, and you can check them out, and we'll dive in them more as we go to the next round next week. But I think we're all broken now. We've all missed, basically. I only missed by one. I had Blaney instead of Martin Truex, so I was damn close, I think. I was there.
I don't know if did I get any of mine? Are we going into this or not?
I guess we can. Why not? I'm great at
Landon,
this.
you got Harrison Burton and Ty Gibbs eliminated correctly.
But I had Truex going pretty far, didn't I?
No.
Yeah, no, you were
You
wrong.
got him eliminated in the round of 12.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well,
you have
that's
Chase
further
Briscoe
than
going pretty far. You have him going to the round of 4.
Would you
I
might
thought-
be right on that, by the way.
Okay. I
Yeah.
might be. Yeah, I know.
You-
I might be. I might be right on that.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Yes, that's why I
there was
picked
a
him.
lot of
Come
thought
on.
put into that.
Yeah, that's why I picked him.
Wow, what a liar!
I know what I'm doing.
Jesus, what
Just
are
trust
we
me.
doing here? Am I wrong, Josh? Did I had
You got
Keselowski,
3 out of the
Harrison,
4 You got 3
Yeah.
out of the 4 eliminated, correct?
If I had-
I got 1 out of the 4.
I put Blaney. I just needed a shock, and I thought Blaney could be the shock because he was. I don't know. I just thought maybe something crazy could happen on one of the tracks, and he'd be in a tough spot. But it didn't happen.
One of our technicians here at Castle Motors tries to bet me every week at NASCAR. I take his money every week.
Oh,
Every week. Just $10 at a time. I'm like, dude,
what a boss you are!
you don't want to bet
Wow.
against me on NASCAR.
His boss takes all his money. How nice!
Just every week. Sorry, Tony.
Awesome. Speaking of taking things and trading places, there was what I think is maybe one of the first times I've seen this in the way they tried to do it. Rick Ware Racing and Spire Motorsports announced that they are swapping their drivers of Corey LaJoie and Justin Haley starting at Kansas this weekend, as Justin Haley is the most likely driver of the number 7 in 2025, which has been rumored all over. Corey, obviously, out of a ride for 2025, could potentially be the choice of the 51 car in 2025. So a head start for those two teams on evaluating these drivers. Kind of an interesting situation. I don't know, I know Corey texted me the week that was happening, so I guess it was last week, and was like, hey, big developments. Have you ever heard of a trade before? I was like, not that I have in this sport. They definitely try to make it into that style sort of thing in their press conference with having both drivers there and representatives from Rick Ware and Spire at the same time. So I don't know. We'll see how this pans out. I think for Corey, the opportunity is there to once again, try and take a smaller team and improve on them like he did at Spire. For Justin, it's probably a big step up in terms of competitiveness of the car he's stepping into.
I can't think of a specific scenario, but I feel like it was not too uncommon decade ago, years past, for when kind of it's not nice to call it lame duck, but lame duck driver situations where they would just sort of get out of the car early and get into their next ride for a couple races. Where did we see that? When was the last time we truly saw something like that?
I was trying to think of that.
I feel
I
like
thought
McMurray's done that before, maybe.
That's who I thought. It was McMurray and Kurt Busch when they were going to that whole swaparoo where they were going, in 3 different places, basically. So Kurt was going to Penske. Jamie was going to Roush from Ganassi. And there was I feel like there was a swap in there somehow, or something went down like that. So I think we've seen a little bit of this, but the way they tried to make it into like a football trade was unique, I think, in this scenario.
Everything's about content these days.
Yeah. It's all
It was
perception.
literally for the show. But I
all
don't.
show.
I mean, why would you? For the trade itself makes total sense. I mean, why wouldn't you? Right? Especially either of those teams. Their sponsor stuff is already probably in place. I'm assuming that these last 10 races that Corey didn't have any major partners on the car, that, he might have some of his own partners, but it's not like it wasn't something that they could shift over to RWR. I mean, we'll find out when we see what's on his car the last 10 races, what went with him and what didn't. We'll see on whatever's on Justin Haley's car, the number 7, what's on, what would have been Corey's but stayed with him, and it's at the end of the day, the thing you got to understand as a fan is the teams were in a position where they had the ability to make these decisions. They did it together, and they did it to the benefit of their teams because they got a head start on their drivers for next year. Even though Corey's not guaranteed in the 51, he's obviously auditioning for the ride, and then Justin, who's locked in to the 7 for next year, they're just getting a head start on that.
Well, that's not announced yet, I don't think.
I thought they announced it was a multi-year deal, or that he was driving the car next year.
Oh, I didn't think they did.
I thought they announced it.
Maybe I missed.
I'm pretty sure it's
Maybe
I'm pretty sure they said that Justin was going to be in the 7.
Yeah, I'm not making it up.
Oh, okay.
I don't like.
No,
I don't know.
I thought you were taking that a thin.
No,
I guess
I'm
I
not
missed
leaking
that.
anything.
Let me confirm.
Well,
Sure.
If they didn't
all right.
announce it, I can tell you they didn't really hear it. I didn't hear it. I thought I heard it from somewhere. So
Well.
either way, they're obviously getting a head start on something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Evaluation, whatever. We'll see how it pans out for them. Speaking of viewers and that sort of thing, I thought this was interesting. Netflix released basically their numbers from January to June this year of 2024, which they've never really done. And in there, we got to see some interesting numbers surrounding NASCAR Full Speed, which, as of this time, has had 3.4 million viewers. To compare that to Drive Survive, which obviously it was emulating for F1, they got 11.6 million for their season.
not
6.
as much as I would have thought.
Yeah, it's not as big. Both are global. Full Swing, the golf documentary that's similar to Drive Survive, 4.8 million views. And then Breakpoints, or Breakpoint,
Tennis
whatever
one.
it's called, for tennis, got 2.7. That actually got canceled, so they're not going to do another season of that. But NASCAR, I believe, is obviously doing their season. At least I see all the cameras and everything everywhere. So kind of interesting. I think that's done well. I mean, if I look at those numbers, NASCAR's first attempt at that sort of documentary style, sort of all the people involved and the teams and behind the scenes did well, and that it's done what they hoped, right? Maybe that's, and I know there was a lot of numbers about a lot of the people that watched were not NASCAR fans or had not experienced NASCAR before, so that's pretty cool to see. People are interested. Nothing quite like the juggernaut that is F1 Drive to Survive, but it's only season 1. That's in season 6, so it's had time to blow up. We'll see where it goes. In some sponsorship news, Geico will end its premier partnership with NASCAR after the season, marking the first time the racing circuit will lose one of the top-tier sponsors from the system. It started in 2020. That was reported by Adam Stern from the Sports Business Journal. Kind of the first time we've seen that. They've been around for a long time, between sponsoring the Germain racing car and then now being a premier partner of NASCAR. Warren Buffett, he's just got so much cash, doesn't know where to spend these days.
So that one is interesting to me. The next one I see on your list here is Stern reporting that FedEx is expected to continue reducing its sponsorship presence with Joe Gibbs Racing after this season, and could actually conclude the deal altogether, which would mean they would end their sponsorship with Joe Gibbs Racing and Denny Hamlin altogether. That one, so these two deals are interesting. There's not a super deep dive to be had here, but the FedEx one, I do want to point out, and this isn't like a I told you so or we knew already type thing, but that one doesn't surprise me. And my only interesting point about the whole thing is, like, we've been watching this happen, right? If you have been paying attention, or if you really watch the sport closely, you've been watching FedEx cut back, because it was not too long ago that FedEx was the, like, basically only remaining blue chip sponsor that sponsored every single race on a car. Right?
Yep.
And that was on the 11. And then it was almost groundbreaking when they cut back from that. Right? And then they've been just quietly and incrementally cutting back over the last few years that Adam mentioned in his tweet there. The part of it that's interesting to me is, I think we're so used to sponsors like up and leaving teams because they're in for 2 years and then they're out. And they're not that they're small deals. I mean, there's been big multi-million-dollar deals that are in and then out and then in and then out. But FedEx is a huge, huge deal. Like, this is, to me, they've been unwinding out for years. And that's what it would take to unwind this type of partnership. because it's a 20-plus year partnership. It's a 20, 30, 40, $50 million a year potentially spend totally, not just on Joe Gibbs Racing, but all of the activation around it, the marketing strategy around it. So it's very possible that, 3 years ago, FedEx internally was like, hey, we need to end NASCAR. What's our unwind, our exit strategy out of NASCAR, right? Okay, here's how we're going to do it over the course of several years to wind down these assets without just completely abandoning them, because they have a tremendous amount of brand equity in the sport. So it's kind of interesting to me to see how a big brand like that sort of divests from the sport. And I don't want to see that. I wish they were increasing their involvement. But
what reminds me of?
This isn't just it's a gradually then suddenly type thing. The Geico thing to me, though, is a little bit more surprising, and maybe I'm not as intimate. Maybe we don't see how they've divested, but the Geico one is surprising to me because it was a big deal back in 2020 when NASCAR changed the dynamic from like title sponsorship of the series. We went from Monster Energy Cup Series to the Cup Series, and was that 2020 when they did that?
I think it was right around then. Yeah.
Right. It was right in that time, and they created this new model, and it was kind of like modeling after. I think they were inspired by Premier League and how they have their tiered sponsors. I actually don't know much about it. I just know that was where some of the inspiration came from, or where you could maybe mimic what they were doing. But it was like multi-tiered sponsors instead of having titled sponsors, and so for Geico, which is a brand that spends a ton of money in marketing and brand marketing, and has been in the sport for a long time, to be cutting out of their premier partnership makes me wonder, like, is there some rest of the story we're missing? Are they moving it somewhere else? Are we going to hear a different announcement? Is this really not a big deal? Or is this a sign that, like, that tiered sponsorship partnership just isn't a right fit or wasn't working? That part of it is more surprising to me, and I'd love to know more about it.
So on the FedEx thing, it reminds me so much of Miller Lite. You remember if they slowly but surely reduced until they were gone. And right. I think they still do what Keystone Light does, a race or two with the 2-car still. But they did the same thing. It was like a gradual, quiet exit, and then they were gone. And I think it's a smart, for companies and brands that have so much invested, not only just on the race car, but brand equity in terms of the program and racing and people involved and that sort of thing. It gives it sort of an exit plan and is something that's not fascinated
shocking. I don't even know, maybe I'm just like concocting this thing that's in my head myself, but I get fascinated by thinking of that, putting yourself in the shoes of those CMOs and marketing executives that are making those decisions, that like the forward thinking, the long-term thinking that they have, that like Miller Lite, FedEx, they know they've built so much equity in the sport that they can't just pull the plug. It would actually probably have a negative effect, a real negative effect on their brand, right? Yep. More negative than whatever 20, 30, 40, $50 million they'll save by cutting out of the sport, right? So they have to strategically say, okay, they might have decided 4 years ago that they're getting out of NASCAR, right? But it's like, okay, here's what it's going to take for us to truly get out of NASCAR without harming our brand, because there's a lot of people that look to FedEx to be involved in the sport, looked to Miller Lite to be involved in the sport. I would think especially a brand like Miller Lite, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's just like it's a graceful way to say goodbye. So we'll see what happens at FedEx. It's not goodbye yet. We don't know. But I'd be sad because I love the look of their cars, and I've always loved all the different paint schemes they do, and just think they were some of the best-looking cars and so iconic. And Denny and that 11 car are so synonymous with them. It would be really weird not to see them in some capacity. Let's talk the Xfinity Series. We do have our special guest, by the way, coming on. This is our most recurring and frequent guest we have on this show, by the way. He's coming up here soon. Just some Xfinity Series news. Harrison Burton's going AM Racing, so he'll be stepping away from Cup into the Xfinity Series in that team that's been trying to sort of take the next step up. They had a pretty good year of Brett Moffitt in 23, and then this year has been very tough for them. Starting the year with Haley Deegan, and then a slew of different drivers and Cup drivers who have jumped in those cars, and they just haven't quite had the success. So Harrison's going to go in there and try to take them to the next level. Riley Herbst, who I'm racing against in the playoffs this year, said in media day yesterday he doesn't know what his plans are for 25 yet. Stuart Haas Racing is going away. Haas factory team announced Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer. So remains to be seen where Riley is going. I know there's a lot of rumors about him going to Cup and that sort of thing, but obviously with all the charter stuff going on, maybe it's not a done deal. So we'll see where that goes. And then just a big win for the Xfinity Series this past weekend on the CW for the first time. 906,000 viewers for the Bristol race, which was the channel's highest rating for any program in 8 months. What a huge win for them. They're spending $115 million a year for the rights to the Xfinity Series. Big win for the Xfinity Series in general, and just overall a good start for people to find the CW and know that that's where Xfinity Racing is. And as they're going to be covering all the races in the playoffs here. It's NBC Sports production and the same talent you've heard on the NBC Sports portion. But a huge win for people to start to get that identification, that branding, that Xfinity Racing's on the CW. As they rumble towards, the biggest rating, which would be Daytona. And we talked about it last week. There was a lot of people taking bets on how many, and people ranged between saying there was going to be 450,000 to 800,000, but 900,000 was an absolute huge win. I can tell you just from a little bit of, knowing the TV world. So that was huge. Really, really big for them. You're muted. My God.
Oh, sorry.
Muted again. Oh,
that was exciting to see.
What are we doing here?
No, that was, I loved seeing that viewership. So good on the CW. Keep up the energy.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think it shows the power of the fans finding where it's at, right? And finding that it exists and this is how you get to it and that sort of thing. Wait a second. You might have just heard a little bit there. We mentioned him twice on this podcast already because we were referencing his tweets.
Twice,
he is
and
the
he
man.
appears.
Yeah, and he appears. It's almost like a wishing well. You sort of say to the genie bottle twice. Adam Stern from the Sports Business Journal joining the Money Lap here to talk all sorts of business from the motorsports world. Welcome to the show, Adam. Thanks for coming on, bud.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So there's been a bit of business news in the motorsports world. I think we want to start with IndyCar announcing a charter system, which was pretty fascinating because if you look at the history of IndyCar, they have gone through the days, the PBG IndyCar World Series, which then became the split of IRL and CART. CART became almost like a franchise public company thing. The teams owned a portion of it. Then it went back to being reunited. They've been sort of that open, just if you can provide a car and that sort of thing and show up and there's enough grid spots, you can be a part of it. But now they're entering this charter system that is it similar to NASCAR? Is that where they got the idea? And sort of what does this entail for IndyCar going forward?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a great point about CART because, of course, when you look back at the history of IndyCar, you actually at one point did have a league that was kind of like a true franchise system like you see in stick and ball, because that is what stick and ball sports is that the team owners of each individual franchise own the league collectively. And, of course, that's way different from what we traditionally see in motorsports at this point, certainly with NASCAR, for example, but I think really all the major series. And so it's certainly at least at this point. And, yes, to your broader question, I think, look, Roger Penske, who owns IndyCar, is a team owner in NASCAR. And we know NASCAR is now coming up on, 9 years of having completed their charter system. 13 of 15 teams have renewed for 7 more years. And so we know about all that. And I think Roger Penske looked at the system in NASCAR that he's a part of as a team owner and said, look, this system has provided enough stability and enough enterprise value, which I think is kind of the key term, to team owners in NASCAR, that it seems like it's something that we should try in IndyCar as well. And, for example, we just saw yesterday Ed Carpenter Racing announced a new investor, which from what we understand they really needed. And the investor and Ed Carpenter himself have both said publicly at this point that the charter system was something that helped get him to come in. So it's something that helps professionalize the sport, as we know. You look at, for example, Justin Marks. They were able to just bring in a major investor recently in Mark Lazarus, and he's someone who's invested. He was a former owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, and he's someone who's invested in a lot of different sports. He's someone who understands franchises, and so I think it's a similar thing in IndyCars. They wanted to try and have a system that could eventually create enterprise value. We know when NASCAR first started their system, charters were basically selling for a couple $1,000,000, and some people thought you were crazy for even spending a couple $1,000,000, and they reached an all-time high of, from what I understand, a couple $1,000,000 less than $40 million last year, somewhere around 37, 38 million last year when Spire purchased that record one. And so that's clearly created a lot of value for team owners. We know when Chip Ganassi got out of NASCAR and sold to Justin Marks, he was able to make a nice 8-figure sum. That sum never got revealed, but it's probably at least $20 to $25 million that Justin Marks paid Chip Ganassi. That if Chip was getting out previously, he wouldn't have made anywhere near that. He would have just sold his parts and pieces for a couple million at best. And so I think Roger Penske saw that and said, let's try that in IndyCar.
Interesting. Is this, Parker and I, we cover IndyCar and we talk about IndyCar, but granted, we are mostly NASCAR guys. Is this something that we knew was coming? Has this been in the works, or did this kind of happen fast?
It's been, I think honestly, to give full credit, I think the first person reporting this was Marshall Pruitt from Racer Magazine, and it was probably about 6 to 8 months ago. So it's been in the works for, I'd say, basically all of 2024. Maybe I would assume Penske and his top lieutenants were kind of planning it maybe in 2023, and it kind of leaked out to the public in 2024. They've been working on it all year, and there's been a lot of back and forth about it, including from the fans. One of the interesting elements of this charter is, for example, Zach Brown, the McLaren Racing CEO, one thing he said that doesn't really move the needle for him on it is it doesn't guarantee him a starting spot in the Indy 500. Well, why did they not do a guaranteed starting spot in the Indy 500? Because when this first leaked out, there was major pushback from the fans about, hey, no, we do not want to have any sort of system that takes away qualifying for the Indy 500. And there was such pushback from the fans that eventually IndyCar took that part out. So this is something that has been going through multiple iterations throughout the year. And once again, to give credit to Racer and Marshall Pruitt, who's been all over this, he reported just this week that I believe there was, he said, 2 teams that just in recent weeks kind of did not want to sign on and eventually signed on after some prodding from Penske Entertainment to get on board before they formally announced this. So, yes, this has definitely been something they've been negotiating for several months, and it even seemed like there were some teams who didn't necessarily love every element of it right through the end. There's some interesting elements, for example. So they have 25 charters, but only the top 22 of those charters are going to qualify for their Leader Circle revenue distribution program, which is worth about $1 million a year per car that qualifies. So there's some interesting elements of it. That might have been part of the pushback from some of the owners, but they've been working on it for, I'd say, for the better part of a year.
And
so you're kind of leading into my next.
Landon, one second.
That?
I was going to get into that in the Leader Circle money. So just to be clear, only the top 22 get that basically $1 million. Is there any money that's guaranteed you just for having a charter, similar to NASCAR? For those cars that don't make the Leader Circle, is it $1 million bonus to be in Leader Circle, or there's just literally nothing if you're not there?
Well, the Leader Circle is what IndyCar has had for several years now, but they're just kind of, now reintegrating into this new system. But what's interesting is that they have created 25 charters to 10 different teams. And from what we understand, those teams got it for free, similar to NASCAR. It was based off the recent 2 years. But at this point, it doesn't seem like the 23rd, 24th, and 25th, from what I don't know all the details at this point, so we're still kind of unpacking this. So we'll wait and see kind of what further comes out. But it seems like that 23rd, 24th, and 25th team, I don't see what major value they're going to have outside of just still owning that charter. And then if they want to leave the sport, they can sell it. But they're going to miss out on what appears to be the major revenue distribution, which again I think might have been one of the things that some teams were pushing back on. I have yet to interview the IndyCar's top executives about this, and I'm looking forward to doing that and asking them what was their thought process. Did they just not have the money, to go from 22 million-ish to 25 million-ish as kind of the total purse payout? Is it just that simple, or is it something more complicated, something we need to figure out? But I think, the Leader Circle is something IndyCar has been doing for years, but they've now kind of reintegrated into this new system. But there's still some questions about how it's all going to work. And look, I mean, every team who's in that top 22 is going to get that payout. I don't know if there's going to be different levels to it, but there's going to be at least some form of a payout to all 22 of those teams.
Well, it rhymes an awful lot to me with NASCAR's supposed, even though they've never enforced it, bottom three policy, right? Where the bottom three performing teams sort of get a penalty or could lose their charters. Obviously, that's not what directly correlated with this prize money from IndyCar, but it is sort of similar where if you're one of the bottom performing teams, you're potentially going to get a penalty. So my question for you, and it leads in with all of this, is okay, knowing what we know now about the NASCAR charter system, everything that NASCAR teams have gone through, we know that very intimately over the last decade, right? All the negotiations. Now we're almost through or completely through this second round of negotiations with the charter renewal system. We've seen the leverage points. What do we know about what IndyCar teams are about to go through or maybe just went through? What do we know about that and what their conversations have been or could look like and what is the futures in store for them?
Yeah, I mean, going back to Zach Brown, he said this didn't really move the needle for him a lot. So he's someone who feels like this isn't necessarily a game changer for IndyCar. Now, look, there are some owners who disagree. Chip Ganassi said he feels like this was one of the most important days in IndyCar history when they announced this. But I think when you look at it, a charter system, of course, it creates that enterprise value in the sense of now you need to get one of these if you want to be able to be in part of the leader circle. But at the end of the day, it's still the sport itself. And so, for example, these payouts are not going to be enough to allow you to run an entire team just on those payouts. Similar to NASCAR's system, where the cost to run a top Cup car is not really compensated fully by what you get from the charter system. So I think you've seen some team owners who say, "Hey, this isn't really moving the needle a whole lot. It's kind of reshuffling what we already have into a new system that just kind of sounds good." But I think IndyCar would push back and say, we need to improve the sport overall, of course, but this is something that's going to give you guys now value if you want to get out of the sport. We'll see what these are eventually worth. Some people feel like, hey, if we're getting $1 million, we could sell them for 3 times forward revenue and sell for $3 million. Other people feel like it wouldn't sell for that much right now. Again, we know NASCAR's charter system started off where they were just a couple $1 million, and NASCAR has a much bigger TV deal than IndyCar. So I think there's some team owners who feel like this didn't necessarily move the sport forward in a huge way. And then again, there was the back and forth about Indy. I'm sure some team owners, as much as they feel like it would have annoyed some fans and would have taken some drama out of the system, you could say, like, when you look at NASCAR, for example, they were able to create a charter system and give guaranteed starting spots in the sport's biggest race, the Daytona 500, without a fan revolt. IndyCar was not able to achieve that, unfortunately. They had a borderline fan revolt about giving guaranteed spots into their biggest race, and as a result, their new system doesn't give guaranteed spots to their biggest race. That would have arguably been one of the biggest values of an IndyCar charter, is if you had a guaranteed spot in this Indy 500. You don't have that because of the whole. So I think that's been some of the pushback.
Look, as a fan, and we talked about it when that was being discussed. I think the Indy 500 qualifying is one of the best shows in all of global motorsports because it's just incredible pressure. It's the greatest mix of speed and daring and handling and everything all together mixed into this wonderful 2-day package of seeing who gets in and who gets the pole. So I'm happy, just as a fan, to not see that. And I think if you think about what NASCAR did, they had that top 36 rule beforehand that sort of eased fans in this idea of like, hey, drivers will be sort of locked into this, right? Which then allowed them to go that path. And I know that's not building the enterprise value that maybe those IndyCar owners wanted, but I think it is, personally, just as a fan, so cool. Some other things I saw, I just want to know if I'm correct on this. So there's almost I believe I saw the limit on amount of drivers that you can have drive in a season is 3 now, basically in one car. So sort of trying to stop some of the smaller teams we've seen that go through tons of different drivers that can bring funding race by race, that sort of thing, which I think is a good rule. And then the other interesting one I thought that I saw is that you can only have 3 cars now, basically. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And so we saw, for example, Chip Ganassi Racing. They're a team that had to, downsize by 2 cars basically for this upcoming year. So, of course, it's interesting that IndyCar is doing this at the same time NASCAR appears to be doing this with their new charter system. Of course, NASCAR has not formally announced the whole terms of their new charter system yet because they had 13 of 15 teams approve it, and they're still trying to work over those final 2. But from what we've heard, from what we've seen reported, it appears like NASCAR is doing the same thing, of course, which is fascinating in NASCAR, where they're going from, of course, the long time of used to be able to have many cars, of course, and then the charter system, you only could have a maximum of 4 to now a maximum of 3. So, again, I haven't been able to interview Mark Miles yet, the IndyCar CEO. I'm hoping to do that in the coming days, but I would presume this is part of them trying to just have more parity throughout the field. I think that's similar to what NASCAR's thought process is to just not have a couple teams that just dominate everything and spread the love out throughout the field. So, I think that's what the thought process likely is there. And then, I think with the driver one that you mentioned, I don't know the exact motivation of that. I think there's been some thought that they call that the Dale Coyne rule because, of course, Dale Coyne Racing was always, changing the drivers. Well, and look, I've seen some IndyCar drivers who have said, hey, like that rule actually benefited me. Like Dale gave me a chance, and if it wasn't for him, I might not be here right now. So there'd be varying opinions on that, and that might have been part of the pushback as well. But, I don't know the exact rationale on that. It could just be that they feel like it's better to just have drivers locked in for the whole season. But, again, with them, capping the cars at 3, I think that's a parity play, so to speak.
Yeah,
so, go ahead.
Well, I just, as far as I just wanted to address the Dale Coyne point because it's like, we would all love to see the same drivers branded with the same sponsors all year long, and we build just incredible brand equity and all these nationwide brand marketing campaigns, and we've got superstars in the cars and superstars on the pit boxes. But, the sports fluctuate, and the teams, guys like Dale Coyne, I mean, he makes a living racing, right? Like his race team has to operate like a business. And they go through times where they have to adjust their driver lineup based on the sponsorship provided. And, hopefully we can continue to make tweaks to the sport that all go in the right direction, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think, it'd be interesting to find out in due course if he's one of the 2, owners who needed some prodding to agree to this, in part because he felt like some of these rules that we just discussed over the recent minutes weren't ones that matched up as well for his team. And like you said, the way he runs his business. And look, it's worked well for IndyCar to a certain degree over the years. I mean, him being able to bring in all these different drivers helped other teams see here's a kid who might be talented or he might not be talented. So, I think it's just part of the evolution of the sport. I remember when NASCAR first started their charter system, one of the main architects was Rob Kaufman, who's still the chairman of the RTA. And he was always saying, I think NASCAR is a major league sport. And if you look at the Major League Baseball, you can't just go play the Yankees. You got to buy a franchise. You got to, you can't just start a team out of nowhere and go play the Yankees. You have to buy in. And he felt like that was part of professionalizing the sport and making it a major league sport is adding these charters and, making it like that. So, yeah, I think there's clearly going to be some effects from this and some trickle-down effects and some unintended consequences, just like there always are with anything in life. But we'll have, I think this is just IndyCar's hope that overall this is going to professionalize the sport more. And, again, we'll see how those consequences play out.
Yeah, and I would say personal dream of mine is to one day own a car in the Indy 500. And they still left me that possibility, Adam. So I'm really happy for them, and I love their charter design here and leaving the Indy 500 open. Before we move on from IndyCar, I do want to jump in the NASCAR charter stuff just quickly. Anything on the any news on the FBI investigation between Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, and Andretti there that went down?
Yeah, I mean, that's, of course, absolutely fascinating because we know that, Andretti, to a certain degree, their whole situation with Formula One has led to Congress kind of getting on at Formula One's tail. And now we have a situation with Andretti leading to the FBI getting on Rahal's tail. So it's just been a wild couple months from that regard. I haven't seen a huge update yet, but it appears like it's something that involves, a former employee of Andretti who went over to Rahal, proprietary data that somehow is alleged to have been taken. But, yeah, pretty dramatic to see the FBI involved in this. And some people have kind of questioned it, too. Like, why would you need the FBI involved in this? Some people say it has to do with the cyber security aspect. But, Yeah, certainly not something I don't think any of us had on our bingo card to see a race team getting raided by the FBI.
It's all
That's a
content,
first.
baby.
That's a first. So let's talk NASCAR. Where are we at? We had just a couple weeks ago all the teams except 2311 and Front Row signed the charter agreement, from what we understand, that comes into effect in 2025 onward. What's the latest? Is there anything new that is sort of leaking out about this, and where those two teams stand?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to frame it and start it off, because the reality is nothing really has leaked yet from 2311 or Front Row about what they're planning here. And that's what everyone is trying to figure out, or at least everyone is wondering at a minimum, is what exactly are they going to do here? 13 of the 15 teams have already signed on. So theoretically, the idea of the team sticking together is over. That was, that when you look at when groups of labor, employee groups, et cetera, go on strike, one of their major strengths is that they're all together and that they can all say at once, we're all going to go on strike, or we're all going to not do something. That's out the window now for 2311 and Front Row. So whatever leverage the teams had, certainly it's gone down now for the remaining holdouts. And so at this point, I think a lot of people are wondering, what else could they be getting at besides either just holding some conversations behind the scenes and making a little bit of a stink before they eventually sign on, or preparing for a lawsuit. I would love to hear what other options there really are. And look, I think 2311 has made clear that they're going to continue to run next year regardless. Could they possibly run as an open team while they're suing NASCAR? I guess it's possible they could. They just signed Bubba to that extension. As part of that, Denny Hamlin spoke to the media, of course, we saw this past weekend, and said, we're going to continue running. We've told our employees, no matter what, that's not going to affect this. So it really raises questions as to what else they could be getting at. And it does seem, some people are of the opinion that it seems like they're setting up for a lawsuit. But if that's the case, they haven't confirmed it yet, and nothing's leaked out that they filed it yet. So it's kind of wait and see right now. Again, I think there's a thought that Front Row is the more likely of the two teams to eventually settle up and sign on and get on board with the other 13 teams. But we'll have to see if that ends up being the case. It's possible that they both hold out together, that they both join in on a lawsuit together. Those options are all out there, and nothing really is leaked out yet. Everyone is wondering what they could be getting at, because there's not a lot of leverage left unless they want to go to court.
Well, so then it just doesn't, there's some stuff that's not adding up to me then, because we were told that there was a Friday deadline. How many Fridays ago was it now? 3 or 4 Fridays. There was a Friday deadline of midnight, right? So a deadline to me means like there was an or else, right? Either you sign it now or else something, right? And it was obviously a meaningful enough deadline or demand on NASCAR's part that 13 of the 15 teams signed it. So now we're in the or else period of this. Well, what was that or else? Do we even know what that was, or have any insight to what that could have been that could maybe help us understand what 2311 and FRM are going through right now?
Yeah, I would assume it would have to be something along the lines of like, this is your last chance to sign up for this deal. And if you don't sign up for this deal, then you can't be part of the next deal. And that means you won't have charters, because you're not part of the charter system. So here's the thing about it, though, is this is all happening in August, September 2024. Now we're in September 2024. Well, the current charter system from 2016 through 2024 is not expiring until December 31st at midnight. And so from that regard, I feel like NASCAR perhaps can only do so much right at this moment. And they also, of course, only want to make so much of a stink about it in the middle of their playoffs. And so I don't think from anything I've heard, I haven't heard that they've gone and said, hey, we're taking your charters right now. I don't think they really can take their charters right now, because
no.
How could you take their charter from the old deal about something about the new? Because these teams could just say, oh, we're done with NASCAR after 2024, and that would theoretically be legal. So I assume that it's something along the lines of, this is your last chance and we're not negotiating anymore. Now, look, is it possible that NASCAR ultimately have said, hey, we understand why you guys had some questions, and we're gonna still let you sign on as long as you do it by some upcoming date? I think that's certainly possible. But I think the key is that NASCAR basically said, we're done negotiating at this point. We're not going to give any more. And so you need to either sign on, or you're basically saying you're not going to be part of the sport after 2024. So I think that's really what the threat was.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating time because these two teams are also the ones that were tabbed to, add additional charters this offseason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a massive percentage potentially of the charters for 2025 sort of in limbo right now, which I think to your point, which everyone's trying to figure out, is what is the motive and then what is their desired outcome with this?
Yeah, and I think when you look at 2311, for example, there's been rumor that they're going to have a third car next year, that, there's been rumors that it's going to be, Riley Herbst in the car. But Riley Herbst has come out just in the past couple of days and said, I'm not sure about that. So a lot of things are in limbo. There's been questions about who even bought that third car. For example, if that third car might be going to 2311, but did 2311 ultimately buy that charter, or did someone else buy that charter and is just going to use it with 2311? There's been things like that have happened before. Nothing's been confirmed yet, so we'll have to see exactly. But yeah, I think this is all playing into it. And of course, interesting as well that they chose to announce an extension with Bubba Wallace in the middle of all this. And then to your point, of course, Front Row did buy a third charter from Stuart Haas. So yeah, I think this is all huge. And again, I think there's a thought that Front Row is probably the more likely of the two to ultimately settle up and get on board with NASCAR, but we'll have to see.
Wow. Well, we'll just we'll keep tracking it, man. I appreciate you coming on. You are now our most frequent guest, by the way, and we'd love to have you keep coming on. But we're gonna we have to do something for you. We're gonna get you we're gonna get Josh in connection with you. Help your camera set up a little bit for the YouTube viewers. Your audio there. You got such great stuff. We want it to come across clearly and in full focus. So we're gonna get you hooked up there. You got such a beautiful background, but we could barely read it this whole time. But thank you so much, man, for coming on. We appreciate it, and it's awesome info. We love having you on here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. That was awesome. He's the man. Great
So
guy.
good. So good.
Yeah.
Great knowledge.
So much info. He mentioned it, by the way. Alexander Rossi announced today he's going to Ed Carpenter Racing next year. Renus VK left them. We'll see where he ends up. But the long time to figure out where Alexander Rossi was going to be racing in 2025 is now known after he leaves McLaren at the end of this, or left McLaren basically at the end of the season. Let's talk F1. We got a real points battle. First and foremost, McLaren leading the Constructors' World Championship at the moment. And in terms of the Drivers' Championship, Landon Norris has closed that gap to within 52 points of Max Verstappen, which they get 25 points for a win, 18 for second, so on and so forth. But just one bad race for Max outside the points, a win by Lando with the speed they have in McLaren, and this thing has seriously tightened up. We got 7 more races, basically.
There's
so
plenty of time.
Plenty of time. And to add in, this was the part that I thought was really interesting. Max Verstappen has been penalized with community service for his remarks on the no swearing policy that the FIA is trying to enact in F1, where they don't want the drivers swearing, which I can tell them, go F yourselves. Drivers can have any personality you want, and you can't build this thing up on Netflix Drive to Survive with the F word, every second word, and then decide arbitrarily, you know what, we don't like that anymore. Now, it has been a thing. I got to give a little credit to the FIA. It has been a thing that in press conferences, lewd remarks and that sort of stuff can be penalized, but it's never been done. So this was kind of stepping outside the norm for the FIA to do this, and the Drivers Association was not happy about it. They kind of alluded to the same things I just said, which is like, hey, wait a second, this is ridiculous. This is the modern world. And Max basically said a lot of people say a lot of bad things when they're full of adrenaline in other sports. It just doesn't get picked up. I couldn't even say the F word. It's not even that bad. What are we, 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds? So what do you think on that?
Oh, it's wild. I mean, I don't know if it's just interesting. I don't know if I have an opinion. I mean, it is tacky to walk around cussing, but we all do it to some degree. I've sworn and regretted it plenty of times. Done it on this podcast. Generally regret it after you say bad words.
That's sad.
But
I'm sorry.
I
try to use them.
My comment was on the McLaren leading the manufacturer points or constructor points real quick or whatever you call it in
Okay.
F1 now. So I just had to chuckle to it because I think I saw something where it was like, this is the first time that a non-Red Bull, somebody other than Red Bull was leading those points since 2019 or something.
Yeah.
And it just made me think of my childhood watching F1 and like seeing Ferrari just win everything all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like we woke up one day and then Mercedes was winning. And like and then it was like Red Bull, and it's just things change, man. Things happen. All good things come to an end. And we kind of, I don't want to say we predicted this. We talked about it on the podcast earlier this year with the drama around Christian Horner. And, could this be the end? And does this mark the top of Red Bull? And it's only downhill from here. We broke the chemistry. And sure enough, those things are what happened. But at the end of the day, like, it just happens. Things change. The winds change. Things come and go. Good things come to an end. And Red Bull's dominance is over for now.
And they've consistently lost people over the last 6 to 8 months. Not only Adrian Newey, but just all sorts of different people within the technical side have gone and been announced to be leaving and going to other teams and that sort of thing. And I think you said it.
It's all because
peak
Max
Red Bull.
Verstappen was saying bad words.
That's exactly why.
Well, so here's my other funny point on this. We haven't heard this about Max, really. I mean, we've known he's always been a bit of a spitfire, right? But, he hasn't had a whole lot to cuss about in the last 5 years.
That is a good point. It's been pretty cheery now they're in a battle.
Yeah.
You know what I like about that guy? I always find more respect for competitors like him who win a ton, they dominate whatever. And then it starts to kind of get taken away from them a little bit, but you don't really see kinks in the armor. Like, he seems to be very calm, very composed. He's just Max. He was just as fiery when he was winning all the time, right? Like, to me, maybe he's swearing more, I don't know, but I think in terms of what I've seen so far and his demeanor in interviews and that sort of thing, he just seems to be the same guy. That's just, like, hey, I'm here to drive the F1 car as fast as I can, and then, everyone else can shove off. And it's just like, that's how he operates.
That's a good point, and it's maybe, the takeaway, hopefully for the fans listening, that they actually get something from what we're talking about here. That is what to watch for, right? If you're a Max fan or you're an F1 fan in general, right, and your driver's no longer winning, or you're looking for that kind of new angle or that interesting thing to look out for with Red Bull, is like, this is what makes the greats, right? This is what makes the champions. It's not how they handle themselves when they're winning, right? It's how do you handle yourself when you're not winning, when you're challenged. And it will be interesting to see how he faces adversity over the next year and couple years, running second, third, fourth, fifth, midway through the pack, whatever, and what it takes for him to get his team back to where it belongs, where he wants it to be.
And I was listening to Zach Brown on the Dale Jr. Download, the interview he did with Dale, which was excellent, by the way. If you haven't heard it, go check it out. And he alluded to, McLaren kind of figuring this out. And to your point about things just change, I always think of most things in life are gradual then sudden, right? And for them at McLaren, it was like they could start to see that their data was lining up that was telling them they were going to be terrible. And then suddenly they had data that said, wait, we're going to be pretty good, but we don't know. And they show up and it was pretty good. And then it was like, well, let's see if that was just that track at Silverstone. And then it's like, well, no, it worked here too. Okay, it's working more. And suddenly they lead the Constructors Championship and they are the car to beat right now. And, it's just gradual then sudden. And I just think it's a great euphemism for life, but it's also just how racing, especially F1 with the dynamics of being able to work on the cars and to develop things and that sort of stuff changes so there's things that were started 8 months ago that are making the difference now, and that's just the way F1 is with their development patterns and such. So we'll see where it goes, but it's a real title fight. I think that's pretty, the most interesting part of all this and the most exciting part is that it is a real title fight. It's on the constructor side. Perez is going to have to step up there, obviously, and start really, which he has as of late. But, Red Bull is in a battle. And Verstappen, as I said, one bad race, and this thing's wide open. So we'll see where it goes in the upcoming races. One sadder bit of news, Daniel Ricciardo was the driver of the day at Singapore. but had a bit of a sad cool-down lap and had a moment in that car when he was getting out and had a very emotional interview afterwards because it potentially, now not confirmed, could be his last race in F1 if he's removed from that AlphaTauri and, I'm sorry, whatever, Visa Cash App RB, and is, done in F1. I think the ideas that he was going to go on to get that full-on Red Bull ride have disappeared. And for that team there, it's about the future and having drivers come through, and it sounds like Liam Lawson is next up if he is to be removed. So pretty sad to see that guy. He's a great personality. I think he has plenty of opportunity out in the world. But, F1 was his life and his thing, and you might have just seen the last of it.
So I'm glad you brought this up. We're going to finish this podcast on this. I'm just going to drag out our emotions here on this.
Oh, okay.
You watched that, did you watch those clips that went viral? And obviously there was a lot of fans on Twitter, making it even more sensational than, I don't want to say more sensational than it was. I think it was a pretty sensational moment. Because for me, it was a sensational moment, and this is where I'm going to drag you into it, is I know that moment that he was sitting in that cockpit. Those moments that he had, that pause between getting out of the car from the time the car stopped to the time he actually unbuckled himself, for me, that was so many times throughout my career, whether it was the last race of the year at Homestead, right, the end of the season, the last race I drove in a car before I was changing rides, the last race of a really tough race where laid everything out there and had a great finish or something. Those, for a driver to take an extra couple seconds, an extra minute in the car is always a meaningful moment. It always was for me, right? Because it's the time you unbuckle and you're not connected with the world. You don't have your phone. You're not connected to the radio anymore. Nobody's approached the car yet, and it's just this moment to yourself. I saw those videos and I was like, yeah, he's going through something. That man, whatever is happening right now for him, the way he kind of just took a deep breath, rubbed his legs. There's something on his mind. There's that race, that moment definitely meant something to him because I've had them myself, and I know you'd have too. That's
actually so well said, and not actually, it was well said, and it is. You made me immediately think of moments where potentially I thought it was the end with a team or whatever, right, or that series or that car, and I've had those moments, and I've had those moments in races where I got really close to winning, and it sort of just sit there for a second, and the thing that you pointed out is that you're almost cut off. Maybe if you've undone your radio, then you're just sitting there sweaty. It's suddenly quiet, right? It's the car is tinkling and doing all this. The heat is running through it. You're covered in sweat. You've just put, your adrenaline has been through the roof for a couple hours. And it's that moment of sort of just you and that experience, right?
And there's no reason.
That's such a powerful moment.
There's no reason. We're driving home. Maybe we've already made our point. But, the reason it is a powerful moment, and there's no other time for it, is because there's no reason to sit in the car at that point. It's hot.
Yep.
You're uncomfortable. You're covered in sweat.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 races, I could not get my helmet off fast enough when the race was over, right? Especially when you turn off the power to the car. You no longer have air flowing in your helmet. Your cool suit is no longer running, right? There is no reason to stay in the car, right, except for to soak in whatever it is, is the emotions or the adrenaline or whatever is left of you from the race that you just completed, right?
Yep.
And I have experienced it for various reasons and been I'm going to take this last 60 seconds before somebody approaches my car or I climb out of the car and somebody's asking me for something or giving me something or whatever. And so, just to see that. All the other drivers were climbing out of the car in the video and they're getting out, walking around. He's just sitting there. And it's just yeah, I'm with you, brother.
I know intimately what you're talking about and what he's going through. And I recognize the same things. And I thought, yep, he's either, coming to realization of it or saying goodbye or taking a moment just to soak it all in and remember it, and sort of smell the roses. If it's not the last one, it's close to the end or whatever, right? And he eloquently said, all I've known is that cockpit, and I've spent a lot of time in those cockpits, and maybe I just wanted an extra second. So yeah, it's tough. It's he's 35, similar our age, and sports is one of those few things in the world that at some point either you're told or you get to decide that it's you might not no longer get to do it at the level you've been doing it for a long time. So we'll see for him. Nothing's been confirmed yet, but he's, like I said, he's such a good personality and such. I'm sure there's other stuff, but there's got to be few feelings in the world like driving an F1 car at that level. Yeah. Oh no. Last week, Landon, I made a bit of a promise, but I didn't realize we were going to have.
You can't put him
What's
on
that?
now. He's in the green room crying. We've just spoiled all of his makeup because we just. So Kyle, we're gonna give you a week off.
Jeez.
His makeup is running. We went too heavy with the Ricciardo segment.
No, we did. It got emotional. We had Adam, which was a last minute thing.
Kyle Busch next week. Next week will be the week.
It just has to be at this point, bud. We are so sorry. We're gonna make.
We want to bring you on with more positive energy.
Yeah, it just got a little. You're nowhere close to done, so we want we want to talk about happier topics with you. That's it for the Money Lap. Thanks for listening and watching. Peace. Thanks for listening or watching. If you want to be heard on this show, go to moneylap.com to leave us a voicemail. Be funny, be irreverent, or be insightful, but don't be dumb. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us grow. And if you're listening, please leave us a 5-star review to be featured on this show. Follow us on X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We'll see you there.